Hello and welcome back to After Whistle Sports Podcast. I'm joined by Jonathan and Jack today for our Week One recap. We had an amazing few days of football. I mean, tonight we still have a game, Georgia Tech Clemson, which we might go into a little bit. But I don't know. What are your main takeaways, guys? It was a crazy week, a bunch of awesome games.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with this one. First of all, last night, one of the craziest games I've ever seen between LSU and Florida State. Neither team really felt like it wanted to win. Of course, we get the blocked extra point after the 99-yard drive that Jaden Daniels led with a minute and 20 seconds to go. We had the crazy out of bounds play with 1 second to go on what people thought was going to be the final play of the game. But neither team wants to win that one. And then, of course, Saturday night, we have the two big games, one in the swamp between Florida and Utah, and then the Ohio State Notre Dame game, in which, I have some mixed feelings about what Notre Dame did and more good things than bad things about Ohio State, which I feel like a lot of casual fans will tell you they played very bad.
Yeah, I think there was a general, I have a general dissatisfaction with how a lot of the top 10 teams in the country played. You mentioned Ohio State. I think their offense kind of came out flat. I agree there were some good takeaways for sure. Bama got it done against their whatever terrible opponent they played. Georgia obviously destroyed Oregon. Notre Dame's defense looked solid, but Utah lost. I mean, some of these other teams that were expected to really uh hammer some teams like NC State had a lot of hype coming into the season. They won by 1 point against some I don't even remember who, but I just think in general there were some teams that I think underperformed preseason expectations, but that's how it is every year. So we'll see the teams that actually emerge uh that are maybe unranked that probably will deserve to be.
Yeah, I just want to touch on the NC State point again. I mean, they should have lost to East Carolina. And I think I was talking to Jonathan maybe before the game, or I think it was like the night before, and I was like, watch out for this line. Or no, it was the last podcast, and we were going through our picks, and I said, I like Eastern Carolina to cover, and I think that NC State's severely overrated. I mean, I don't know how much detail we want to go into NC State's problems, but to me, that they're closer to a top 40 team than a top 20 team. They don't have the physicality up front. They don't have uh, the ability to really utilize their weapons to the extent of where they were ranked, which was a 13th team. Which again, that's a little bit of an ACC. I mean, I'm not gonna say it's an ACC push because we saw what that conference can do. But last year, it seemed like certain teams benefited from the fact that Clemson was not Clemson, and so that's where you get some of these wacky rankings from NC State and some of these other ACC teams.
Yeah, I think this kind of goes back to just the whole returning players are only good if they're good returning players. You can throw out the percentages on offense and defense of how many players you have coming back and whatever, but NC State doesn't have many NFL players, if really any at all. Maybe a linebacker or two, maybe a wide receiver or two. Devin Leary, I wasn't super impressed by last year, and this year obviously he wasn't great this week. But this is a team that many people thought was like a dark horse playoff team, and I think what you said to me last night perfectly summed it up. They're closer to the 40th best team in the country right now than they are to the 20th best team.
I think Utah is another pretty good example of that, whereas they people had a lot of hype for them, even as a top five playoff favorite, because of how many returning players they have. And I think their talent is a lot higher in that they have defensive players that are gonna be, first high round picks in the NFL draft. But and obviously playing in the swamp is really hard and it's the first game, but you lose game one, unless they win out, there's no playoff case for them, in my opinion, anymore. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think Utah needed to win this game in order to, honestly, in order to give relevance to the Pac-12 at all. The conference itself performed very poorly this weekend, and I don't know if that's just based on some of the matchups they had. I mean, they played some really tough teams, but I mean, Jack, you were at the UCLA game. You're probably one out of what, the 200 people, fans that were at that stadium?
All right, all right. Well, I will say it was like 100. It was unbearable. We only stayed for like a quarter because like it was like 110 with no shade. We were
I
playing.
will pull up the the
The
temperature in
pictures are
SEC
bad. I
country. I
agree,
will
but
pull up the
there are
temperature
no
in SEC
students at
country.
UCLA yet. There's no students. I mean, we have beaches. Sorry, we have better things to do than 100,000 people go sit around at 9 a.m. and I mean, I agree. But it's in Los Angeles. We knew nobody cared
Yeah, I
about
mean,
football.
it seemed like your team was also sitting around at 9 a.m. because they really struggled early on against Bowling
They
Green.
did struggle early on. I was very worried when we went down 17-7. I definitely said some things on Twitter that may have been a little bit hasty about UCLA football. But the offense turned it on in the second half, and there were some problems for sure. I mean, the O line blaring, the secondary was terrible. But though we kind of knew about those things, whether our strong suits are our strong suits. DTR, Charbonnet, they're beasts, bro. Like Charbonnet still, I mean, he rushed for like 200 yards, and then the D line's really good. I think they're high enough quality to to give some of these more heavily recruiting teams like USC's O line some trouble. But we know we got to work on, and hopefully, I agree with you. The Pac-12. I mean, that Oregon game was embarrassing. I mean, obviously that Georgia's just a different level, but it's going to be a tough year
Yeah.
for the Pac-12.
Let's go let's go from dominant teams to dominant players. Jonathan, you're new here, but last year we have this thing where every week we each nominate a after the whistle player of the week. I can start him off here, and my player had 8 receptions for 150 yards and 3 touchdowns, averaging 19 yards per reception. Jacob Cowing out of Arizona, definitely a name to look out for, and I believe he's a transfer from some group of five school. I think a small group of five school, but he was incredible. Jane DeLaura basically the entire game had him open, and he's really solid after the catch. Not a huge wide receiver. He's 5'11", 175 pounds, but he's super explosive. Played an amazing game and ultimately helped Arizona pull off the upset, which, I mean, I called just a week ago, but Arizona is so close to that three game win total for the season. So that's a step in the right direction. He played an outstanding game.
Yeah, I think Anthony Richardson has to get a mention here. This is a guy that I was super high on. I actually had as my quarterback 3 in this class coming into the season. And, like people had some doubts. Why did Emory Jones play over him last year? And we found out quickly on Saturday night that the reason Emory Jones played last year is also the reason that Dan Mullen was doing the halftime show for that game and not on the field. But, he threw for 168 yards, no touchdowns. We didn't get to really see his arm talent that he had to a full extent, but running for 106 yards and 3 touchdowns, of course, the crazy 2-point conversion he had that went viral. He's going to be a special player, and I'm glad people finally realize the kind of talent he has.
Yeah, Anthony Richardson was incredible. I will throw in a quick honorable mention before I say my player of the week, and that is North Carolina's quarterback, Drake May. Played a great game. That game against App State, 63-61, was a lot of fun. But my player of the week is Stetson Bennett. I think there were sort of a lot of question marks from this Georgia offense in that, they came out winning the national championship, and they still don't believe in Stetson Bennett. I mean, they don't think he was talented enough. I mean, but he came out 25 for 31, 6 incompletions with 370 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, this guy's legit. Georgia is a very legitimate national championship contender. And if you didn't believe that before, you got to know.
I love that shout out for Stetson Bennett because I feel like for as much as we talk about Georgia and how good they are, no one seems to want to give Stetson Bennett any credit. Like, I watched him play, and I didn't see any like the negatives people were talking about him last year. Like, he has great arm talent, by the way. Like, the fact that he doesn't have arm accuracy is a lie. Like, he was making throws downfield to different types of targets, on the run, in the pocket. Like, I hate to say it, but like I think he can play on Sundays. Like he can play in an NFL system surrounded by the same type of weapons that he has at Georgia.
Is there 10 quarterbacks in the country right now that are better than him? This is a question that we kind of discussed on our show
Yeah.
yesterday.
So like from what standpoint? Like are we looking at in terms of like NFL talent or like pro potential or just in terms of college, like how good he is on each Saturday?
It's like playing like football, like right now at this very moment. Like I don't think there are 10 quarterbacks in the country right now that
Yeah.
are playing better
Listen,
football than
there might be five.
yeah. I agree with that, but like all these SEC quarterbacks that you would have put in front of him to start the season, Levis, KJ Jefferson, like Hooker, I think you could argue that Bennett's better than each and every one of those guys right now.
Actually, I thought KJ Jefferson was pretty good.
I did too, but he made a couple really poor throws that I critiqued him for. But overall, he did a lot with both his arm and leg.
I mean, I think there are definitely 10 better NFL prospects that are currently playing college football. But I agree with you that, like, right now, in terms of who is the best, like, who I would want leading my college football team on Saturday, Stetson Bennett is up there for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I didn't get to like really say this for the big takeaways part, but the thing that I kept thinking about when I was watching these games is that the SEC is miles above everyone else in terms of composite quarterback talent. Like there are so many elite level quarterbacks in the SEC, and like everyone always talks about the speed, the offensive line, like the big boys in the trenches, but the quarterback talent was not something I was expecting to see that big of a difference. Like if you watch Aiden O'Connell, who supposedly was the second best quarterback in the Big Ten this year, and then you turn on like really almost any SEC team minus Vanderbilt, and you can compare him to anyone, and that's not what you see from the Pac-12, the ACC, the Big Ten. You don't see 6 or 7 quarterbacks who can dominate a game, who you can trust to win you a game. There's a lot of quarterbacks that can help you or like manage the game, but there's not a lot of quarterbacks in the other conferences that can really win you a game like the SEC has.
I got a question. So, do you think what do you think I agree with you. I think the SEC is way above all the other conferences in terms of quarterback play. What do you think the second best conference is? Because I don't know. Like, I feel like it might be the Pac-12. Is that crazy to say?
I think it's the ACC.
I think it's the ACC, but again, like Devin Leary wasn't fantastic to me.
I mean, the Pac-12 had their issues. Like, I think Bo Nix did not play very well. Cam Rising did not play very well. But you kind of forget how. I mean, they had a lot of trends like Kay Williams, ETR. I mean,
Jaden DeLaura was fantastic.
Yeah, I was
He's
gonna
the
say
best Pac-12 quarterback I saw.
who?
Jaden DeLaura,
Oh, I
Arizona.
mean,
Yeah,
I think this feel like it's sneaky depth in my opinion. I don't know. The ACC definitely solid too, but
Yeah, I think in the ACC, I mean, Dylan, I know you don't like Tyler Van Dyke as nearly as much as I do, but even besides him, Jordan Travis looked great last night. Drake May, we already mentioned, looked super good for North Carolina. I think that you're going to see a different DJ this year, and that's going to start tonight. And like the thing with Clemson is either DJ is going to play well or Cade Klubnik's going to play well. One of the two. And then, of course, Leary didn't look great. Brennan Armstrong is not going to look as good this year because he's not in that air raid system anymore, but he's still a solid quarterback. So, yeah, I think the ACC probably is second in terms of quarterback talent right now.
and on that note, I think I want to talk a little bit about the game tonight, which is Clemson against Georgia Tech. And I think if I have everyone correctly, like I think we all think that Clemson is a college football playoff, like at least contender. Like I think they're going to make
Yeah.
it personally. But what do you need to see against a far inferior opponent tonight that will give you some more hope that this isn't the same Clemson team as last year?
I mean, when you say that, I agree with you that it seemed like Clemson had an off year. But what if they win like 9 or 10 games? Like the fact that that's an off year for Dabo Sweeney and Clemson proves just how dominant this team has been there. Like we kind of forget because they kind of had a bad last year, but like it was Bama, Ohio State, and Clemson. It wasn't Georgia in these past couple college football playoffs before last year.
Yeah, but
Um,
I just want to expand a little bit on what I said. Like, I'm not saying they had a bad season. I'm just saying they shouldn't lose to ACC teams because they are far better. And so
Hmm.
when they lose to ACC teams, that is like something's wrong. Like it's not just like, oh, they're not playing well. If they lose to ACC teams, they're doing something wrong. And so what I'm asking is like, what do you need to see tonight that will show you that these mistakes have been fixed?
So I think that the main thing, and everyone will point to DJ, but I think the first thing is that we need to kind of see that their offensive line is way better tonight because Clemson's not a team that in the last 6, 7 years has had bad offensive line play, even average offensive line play. So we need to see that they are back to playing elite level offensive line players, and with that, I think it'll come with DJ playing better because giving a quarterback more time will always end up with better results. I'm also really excited to see Will Shipley healthy tonight. He's my pick for the Doak Walker Award, best running back in the country. And, I think healthy last year, he has a better freshman season than Travis Etienne does. So I'm excited to see the leap that he makes.
Yeah, I think there's a question mark because this is the first time in I think Dabo's entire career at Clemson, which is like 15 years, that he's had both a new offensive and defensive coordinator in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Venables left to go be the head coach at Oklahoma. Tony Elliott, defensive coordinator, went to Virginia. So I think this is a very new team. I think the quarterback problems were there. I think he's talented enough. I mean, this guy was a Heisman top 5 favorite. He did like last year. I think he's solid. I think he'll have a lot of improvements. I think this game needs to be a statement game though, showing that these ACC teams that they're heavily favored in are not going to be playing with Clemson. I think needs to put up. I, I think they will put up 3, 4 touchdowns in the first half. I don't really think this game is going to be close. Um, but defense definitely got to get there too. I mean, we talked a lot about the offense, but new coordinators is hard, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I expect Clemson's defense to be flying around the field tonight. Um, I believe I had them ranked as like maybe the second best defense in the country, like Clemson, and which is crazy because Georgia and Alabama both have really really good defenses. I just think Clemson's on that level, and
Mm-hmm.
so I want to see that tonight. Like I want to see Georgia Tech with less than 100 yards rushing, and I want to see them like shut out in the first half. Because I think, listen, I think their offense will be better. I don't think Dabo is going to accept the fact that he has a 5-star quarterback sitting on the bench and his starting quarterback is not doing his job. Like he won't accept that, especially after last year. So whoever starts at quarterback or whoever plays tonight or in the future, I think will be the guy that Clemson needs in order to win games. But their defense to me is what I need to see the leap from really, really good to elite. And if they can make that leap, then I think that they're a national championship contender.
Yeah, I mean it'll be interesting to see because I mean we saw this first week it's going to be tough to keep up with Alabama, Georgia, and I know Ohio State didn't play particularly well offensively, but we know what they're going to end up being on that side of the ball. So I think the offensive jump is just probably the main thing to look out for tonight.
Let's go back and talk a little bit about like one team that surprised you or disappointed you. Maybe we can do like go through surprised first, and each of us gives um our choice, and then we'll go through disappointed later. So anyone wants to start with a surprise team? I guess I can start then. um Again, I talked about them already, but Arizona really surprised me in terms of the way that they won. Like I thought that they were going to win the game, but San Diego State was a solid program. They didn't play very well the other day, but I thought that the game was at least going to be back and forth. But that wasn't the case. Arizona completely dominated. I don't think they were down at all in the entire game, and they just looked really good. And they played really clean football. Jed Fish coached a really good game, and you saw the level of talent that they have on the outside with all their athletes that they got this year. And I'm still sticking with my pick that they can be a surprise team in the Pac-12, and they're going to beat teams. Like they're just too good to not win big games.
I guess I can go next. The team that I guess surprised me this week was BYU. They came into the week, I think, a 12-point favorite against South Florida, and that game was, I want to say, 38-0 at one point. Final score was 50-21. They played extremely well on both sides of the ball. They ran the ball for 312 yards, and Jaron Hall threw for 261. This is a team that we know how difficult their schedule is. They got those 4 key games between Baylor, Oregon, Arkansas, and Notre Dame. And if they win all 4, they're going to be a playoff team with those quality of wins. And I think this is a team that probably beats Baylor this week at home. They look that good.
I think for my surprise team, I'm gonna go with Syracuse, kind of an out of the box pick for sure. But I really, really expected them to not be able to deal with the offensive showcase that I think people expected out of Louisville. Malik Cunningham, kind of a big talked about player, and Louisville got held to 7 points. Malik Cunningham had 150 yards passing and only 30 yards rushing. I thought Syracuse's defense played really well, and obviously they have some great pieces. I mean, we talked about Sean Tucker a lot. He, I think, is a top 5 running back in college football. I mean, he only ran for 100 yards and a touchdown, but there were, he also caught 6 passes for 85 yards and a touchdown. I mean, this guy is a legitimate dual threat. I think Syracuse could give some of these ACC teams some trouble. I think it was a road game for Louisville. So again, but being the underdog by touchdown and coming out and winning by more than 3 touchdowns, I think is a pretty noteworthy.
Okay, I want to go into. Oh, sorry, are you gonna comment on that, Jonathan?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna give a disappointing team, but
Okay,
if you want to go first, go ahead.
I'm gonna actually do 2. I'm sorry if this is taking so
No,
long.
go all good, all good.
These are 2 Big Ten teams. The first is Iowa, who did not score a touchdown, but they won 7-3 against South Dakota State. Terrible, like really, really bad. I don't even want to talk about them anymore because no one should have to acknowledge that game even occurred. Iowa's just Iowa, okay? Then the next team I want to go through, and I think they're on the disappointing team for week 0 as well, but Nebraska really struggled with North Dakota. They ended up winning 38-17, but they were tied in the second half. And they also let up 10 points in the third quarter. And so this game was not an easy game for Nebraska. They seem to be getting worse each week, which I didn't know could happen. This is going to be a brutal season for Nebraska.
Yeah.
They might only win like 2 games in the Big Ten.
I mean, Iowa, how about Spencer Peters? Dude is terrible. I used to like.
What does he need to do to not start? Like, actually, what does he need to do?
I don't know. The Iowa's offense was like, I mean, does South Dakota State have do they have a weight room? Like, I don't know. But my disappointing team, I mean, it's pretty obvious for sure, but it was Oregon. I mean, I think Bo Nix had a lot of expectations coming from the recruiting standpoint, from where he came from. Really fell flat at Auburn. And this guy, I mean, 21 for 37 with a QBR of 59 and 2 interceptions and no touchdowns. That was not a good stat line. I mean, again, we talked about Georgia. I think a lot of this was a testament to how dominant they are going to be in this year. But not 49-3. I mean, that's brutal. And this team, was supposed to be the second or third best team in the Pac-12. I mean, it's very disappointing. And, it's new head coach, new coordinators, obviously another tough scenario coming in, a lot of transfers, but they did not show what I think they wanted to show.
So my disappointing team, and this one could surprise some people, but I'm going to go Kentucky. And, this is like Kentucky covered by a touchdown, but they didn't play very well in the first half. And they ran the ball for under 2 yards per carry. And Mark Stoops teams, like their staple has been just running the football down people's throats. And I get they're without Chris Rodriguez, but they're going to be without him for the next 2 games, one of them being Florida in week 2. I thought it was just a really disappointing night for a Kentucky team that I think is the highest expectations coming into a season that they've ever had. And, this is a kind of a team that I felt would underachieve. And I think they kind of proved me right in week 1. And I think Florida's going to handle them in week 2.
Sorry, real quick, I want to do another disappointing team. I feel like there are a lot of disappointing teams, but South Carolina, I expected them to steamroll Georgia State, and the score line or the final score might be a little bit misleading because they scored a lot of those points kind of in garbage time in the fourth quarter. But Georgia State really hung with South Carolina for most of the game. And Spencer Rattler, I mean, he threw a lot and he threw some touchdowns. He threw for a good amount of yards, but he also made a ton of mistakes. South Carolina also scored 2 of their touchdowns off of punt return or like blocked punts that they returned for touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a ton of questions still about South Carolina's defense. I thought their offense was just all right. And like if you're in the SEC like that, like this is a game where you need to get things right and show your dominance. And that did not happen. Like at some points in the first half, Georgia State looked like the better team.
I'm going to throw in one more disappointing team because I actually just came up with one. I was actually pretty infuriated by the way Houston played. This is a lot of people's pick to represent the group of 5 in the New Year's Six Bowls. And I thought based on just the offensive personnel they had, it was a really bad game plan in the first half until they were down and were almost forced to throw the ball late. I thought Clayton Tune played pretty well. I thought Tank Dell was pretty good, but overall, they just really poor offensive line performance, and they had a lot of trouble slowing down a UTSA team that lost their offensive coordinator from the prior year.
Should we talk about next week?
Yeah, we can talk about next week a little bit. I guess we could just do like a few games to look out for, kind of what we want to see, because I think we're still planning on doing another like full prediction, more like betting podcast later in the week. But I do like kind of looking ahead a little bit. So I was thinking like we can pick some of the bigger games and kind of like give our like early predictions kind of before the lines all come out and change and whatnot. But let's start with Alabama, Texas, the biggest game of week 2. I'll just give my 2 cents first. I think Alabama is going to steamroll them. Alabama is they just always seem to play well in the non-conference, and they always seem to beat teams that think they have them down. Like I think Steve Sarkisian actually thinks he has a chance to win this game. And I think Texas fans think they have a chance to win this game. I'm here to say absolutely not. The early line is Alabama -20. I think that's going to be pumped up a little bit during the week.
I'm getting that before it gets to 21.
Yeah, like listen, Alabama's going to win by maybe 30. I see a very similar scenario to what Georgia did to Oregon, where Alabama's playing their 3rd stringers in the fourth quarter and still beating the Texas starters.
I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, I think their offense will come out a lot better than Oregon is coming out. I believe this game is in Texas as well. But I'm with you that I think Bama will still win by, I mean, 20 is a lot of points. But, I agree that I think Bama wins and covers. I'm predicting a score something like, 52-30 or something like that. I think that's not all that, ridiculous to say. I don't think Texas has a realistic chance to win this game. But, they looked solid in their first game against a bunch of D3 players or whatever.
Yeah, so next week, I actually think that next week we have probably the most interesting like Pac-12 after dark slate of the season. We have 3 Pac-12, or not 3 Pac-12 teams, but 3 West Coast teams playing late, and those games are Baylor, BYU, Oregon State, Fresno State, and Mississippi State, Arizona State, or not Arizona State, Arizona. But I think we have a lot of good quarterbacks playing in that session, and those 3 games, I think all of them are pretty intriguing.
Yeah, I want to focus a little bit on the Baylor BYU matchup because I personally really like Baylor. Um, I said it a while back in our Big 12 preview, but I thought that this was um, like one of the stronger teams. I think I had Oklahoma ahead of Baylor, but Baylor for sure one of the stronger teams in the Big 12. And it's interesting because they're not built like a lot of these other teams. They have a really, really good defensive line, probably the best in the Big 12. Uh, and I think there's still questions about their offense a little bit. I believe like they looked really solid. They played an FCS school week 1, so like there's not much you can take away from that. But Blake Shapen looked pretty good with 17 for 20 for 214 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's going to need to play really well against BYU because BYU is really they're just so fundamentally sound. You can't make mistakes because they will control the ball. And I really think this is an interesting matchup of D-line play against really good O-line play. And so I think whoever can control the trenches will end up winning that game.
Yeah, I mean, I like Baylor too. It's a road game for them, and I think BYU is actually coming out as the betting favorite. But I don't I don't know if BYU like playing in Provo has the same advantage necessarily as some of these other home games. Like obviously they have a lot of fans, but like it's BYU. Like I've heard some very weird stories from players about going to play at BYU. Like the fans will just like they'll heckle them, but they won't like they're not drunk, like they're dead sober, and they're like, "Yo, like you stink." Like it's like a very odd like dynamic for sure. But you know, Baylor came. Both these teams came out and played pretty terrible teams. I mean, BYU won a road game by like 4 scores. You know, Baylor obviously dropped 70 points on this poor HBCU or whatever. But you know, I think we talked about it a lot on the Big 12 preview. But I think Baylor's pretty solid. I mean, I don't think they're. I don't know if they're a serious Big 12 contender in my opinion. It's a hot take, I know, but I do think they will be there.
Yeah, let's go on to just I think we have time for one more game preview. And I just want to hear your opinion on this because I'm going to be on Team Arizona like maybe the entire season. I need that 3 wins, okay? And this one would be really important. Mississippi State going all the way to the desert, playing at Arizona. Mississippi State's currently a betting favorite of about 10.5 points, which, listen, that's too much. Like, did you see Arizona play last week? I don't think Arizona will win, but I'm excited to see Mike Leach get a little bit nervous in the first half when he looks at Arizona's weapons. Like, he might want to like acquire some of them in the transfer portal after the season, but I think Arizona could definitely show out. It's going to be a 11 o'clock Eastern time kickoff, so this one might be crazy.
Yeah, without a doubt, Arizona did like look very good against San Diego State, probably one of the most overachieving teams in week 1, at least based on preseason expectation. But Mississippi State is one of the most dynamic offenses in the country. They have a really talented college quarterback in Will Rogers. I don't know if he's a pro, but he throws the ball very well. Threw 5 touchdowns week 1 against Memphis, against a not very good Memphis team nonetheless. But I think Mississippi State takes care of this one, even coming across the country.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be closer than 10.5. And I think it will be closer probably early on. I also would think Mississippi State will pull this one out because I do think, like, at the end of the day, it's like SEC recruiting versus bottom of the Pac-12 recruiting. Like,
They do not recruit bottom of the Pac-12. That's a lie. That is a lie. They were the 22nd best recruiting team in the country last year. Okay.
Okay, fine. They're better than Washington State and Oregon State. You got me. But
they might be better than Mississippi State. Hold on, I'm gonna pull up the rankings right now.
Go to the college team talent.
Oh well, no, I don't want to look at that. Listen, Jed Fish doesn't have all his guys yet, but
you just want to look at their last class.
Yes, well, like that's the direction the program's heading in, and they brought in a lot of transfers. Like,
yeah, but that doesn't indicate what they are right now.
Yeah, does that mean Texas A&M's the best team in the country, dude? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, no, we really need a stat that adjusts college team talent to like how old your players are. Like
I agree because like a
A
five-star freshman is not as good as
being
like,
the A&M is fourth in college team talent right now, and that's such a lie because none of their like half of those players that make them like elevated to fourth like aren't getting on the field for them right
They're
now.
like 18. Yeah, like these guys, like for sure.
I'm
I
looking
don't
for
know.
this by the way. So I'm
State is
pulling up.
20 Mississippi State is 29th, by the way, in college team talent. Arizona's 48. So
Okay. But okay, again though, the transfer ratings, they did bring in a lot of transfers who are playing and
Ratio
yeah, they're
48.
bringing in a lot of transfers who are playing well, and they used the rating for the college team talent from like this like made up transfer ranking, which like I don't
yeah,
believe is a real thing. So you got to take that with a grain of salt.
yeah, they do try to adjust them, but
By the way, Arizona has a higher team talent than Cincinnati.
and Minnesota for that matter.
And okay, but like Cincinnati made the playoff last year.
My current 11th best team in the country, Minnesota.
Wait, what?
I think Minnesota.
Hold on, Creasy, man, on that real quick.
Oh,
I think Minnesota is so legit. Their defense is incredible.
Listen, I like Minnesota. I think that
11th in the country? What is
Yeah.
that? Like a
I have them 13th preseason.
wait, we need to see this ballot. Hold on, we might have to do for later in the week's episode. We might have to like each come up with our top 25 rankings and just like dissect them because
Like yeah,
I
I
would
mean
also have
I have mine done for week 2. I just like I am obviously like have to change something around if Clemson plays really bad tonight, but I think I have mine done for week 2. And I also like I'm not like I'm not like most polls who just like adjust it based on like what the preseason rankings are. Like now that I've like seen these teams play, they just completely changed.
so you saw Minnesota play and said this is a top 15 team in the country.
Well, I had them at 13 in the preseason, so I already thought they were good. But yeah, no, like they played well. They ran for 300 yards, and granted they played New Mexico State, but they shut them out. Like what else could you have wanted?
Listen, I like Minnesota. I said I think I had them as I had them in Wisconsin as the teams I think will ultimately come out of whatever the bloodshed the Big Ten West will be this year. Um, Minnesota's good. I mean I'm not like super against that take. I think like Rudy, I'm 11 again.
it's a bold
Yeah,
one for
That
sure. I
seems
agree.
pretty
Minnesota's
high.
like
Al- Also, we need to pump the brakes on Iowa a little. They didn't look good, obviously,
Dude, the
but
brakes have been pumped. They're not that good.
no. Pump the brakes on like the negativity. Like listen,
Why?
because they're first of all they're banged up at wide receiver right now. They're banged up at linebacker, and granted, like they played freaking terrible on offense. I get it, but South Dakota State also didn't cross midfield against their defense, not once.
Dude,
So
I saw two safeties. I was very impressed with the safety play. I was impressed with the fact that South Dakota can't field an offense capable of and they were terrible. South Dakota was not good. Let's not make this like, oh, South Dakota's a sneaky good FCS school.
I would
slept on them.
I would
They're not
I would
good.
still bet that Iowa wins 8 games.
I'm gonna take the under. They're not winning 8 games.
I would still bet that Iowa wins 8 games.
Dude, we've seen what Iowa play the last 3 games, and I think they've scored a total of
I don't
like
know if
16
Iowa's going to score a
points.
touchdown in 8 games. I mean, if you can't score a touchdown against South Dakota, these Big Ten teams are like real football programs. Like,
To be fair,
Nebraska, Jack, they play Nebraska, dude.
okay, well, Nebraska's not a real football program, but besides that,
Dylan, and Jack too. I'm sure you guys saw the stat, but Iowa, I believe, since the Penn State game last year, has their special teams and defense has more points than their offense.
Dude, I just need to know how Spencer Petras, like this is important information. Like, how can you be that bad at your job and still keep it?
Yeah,
That's like if I went to class each day and like instead of bringing a notebook, I just like sat in the back like eating Chipotle and I was like facing the other direction. I wasn't even facing the screen. And I'm still getting A's. Like, how is that happening?
Also, so I was told, and I would have to double check to make sure how accurate this is, but my friend who is a diehard Iowa football fan told me that since the Penn State game, they've thrown one passing touchdown that wasn't on a screen pass.
Uh, they shouldn't be allowed to
And,
play
and
football.
hey, it would be two, but they dropped a touchdown on their opening drive against Michigan in the Big Ten championship.
I mean, their quarterback's like 99 cent Ben Roethlisberger.
No. Don't even put him in the same breath as Ben
No, not even
Roethlisberger.
close, dude.
Well,
Like,
I mean, like last year, Ben Roethlisberger couldn't throw more than 5 yards. Like,
I mean,
I think
at least he looked like a quarterback.
Q,
Petrie doesn't even
like
look like a quarterback. He trots onto the field, and you think he's like the punter.
Q,
looks like a
like I think QBR is a terrible stat, but like Spencer Petras having a 1.1 QBR against an FCS team is just absurd.
I mean, it's to the point where I think that like the Petras family has like donated a library or something to Iowa, and it's like they can't not start him, or else they lose all that funding.
I mean,
What dirt does he have on the football program?
we haven't even mentioned Brian Ferentz, the offensive coordinator, who is Kirk
He's
Ferentz'
in this with
son.
Petras. They got something. There's something going on there.
Yeah,
It's like going behind the
it's
Iowa.
dark money for sure. I think we've talked enough badly about Iowa.
Yeah, I mean, we got to see them
They
play
don't deserve our time.
for us too.
they'll still win 8 games.
No, they won't. Okay, I think we're getting a little bit off track. We're probably gonna wrap it up. Again, we'll try to do another episode later in the week. I think this was pretty good. It was a lot of fun.
Mhm.
Um, I'm excited for tonight's game. We'll have our reactions again later in the week, along with our top 25 ballots. But thanks for listening, and tune in later.